I don't even know what we're going to call this. We're going to call this boxing hour right now. I am going live vertically for the first time, just trying out something a little bit different on YouTube because honestly, I don't know where this content fits, right? It's not a traditional boxing match. It's not the MMA content that we're usually covering on this channel, right? We normally talk about UFC content particularly. However, right now, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul are absolutely mogging the UFC when it comes to viewership, when it comes to people, looking into this fight, caring about this fight. So we're trying something a little bit different. I anticipate I'll be live for about 10 minutes here. Shout out to anybody who's rocking with us live. Shout out to my guy Larry, already firing off in the chat. What I wanted to tell you guys is this, right? What is my perspective on the fight? How do I feel about it? Who do I think is going to win? That's what we're ultimately here to talk about. And the fights are going to be starting soon enough. So let's get into the action. Mike Tyson, I love Mike Tyson, right? If you guys look, let's see behind me, you can see all the posters I have up on my wall. I've got a lot of Muhammad Ali, Ali Frazier, but there, Tyson Holyfield, right? I have a lot of old school boxing posters. I'm a boxing fan, certainly not as well informed as I am about mixed martial arts, right? So I'll always tell you guys where I'm coming from, what my background is. I'm a wrestler, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. That's what I know better than boxing. But what I could also tell you is this. For a long time, guys, I've been talking about Jake Paul. I was kind of fascinated by the whole thing when he was on his come up. I actually went and watched him box Tyron Woodley in person in Cleveland, Ohio. So if you guys, have been tuned into the Jake Paul experience for a long time, then you might know, how the Jake Paul experience typically goes. And what that means is he finds somebody that has credibility, somebody that has believability, right? Why would you tune in to watch a guy like Jake Paul fight? I think the answer is pretty straightforward. You want to see him lose. You think about a guy like Floyd Money Mayweather. Why did people tune into Floyd's fights? For the most part, it wasn't because they thought he was a really nice guy. They were super impressed by his boring decisions. He got people to care about watching him fight because they wanted to see him lose. It's a good way to sell a fight. When you look at a guy like Jake Paul, a lot of people want to see him lose right now. When you talk about nostalgia, when you talk about things that get people in the door for a fight, oftentimes people are watching a fighter that they, used to know, somebody that they expect to see, and then they see on the night of, man, it's just not what I expected from this athlete. And it's because we all get older, right? The one thing you can't help in this life is father time is coming for each and every one of us, right? So you have a Mike Tyson. I could just share with you guys, you could find this video yourself 20 plus years ago when Mike Tyson was fighting Lennox Lewis. People were saying, Mike is washed. Mike looks like a shell of himself. Mike looks like he doesn't want to be there. 20 plus years ago. They were saying he's there for a check. He's there to just pick up the free money. That's all he's there for. He doesn't care about winning. He doesn't care about competing. Now, he's got a YouTuber across from him, okay? He's got this kid, Jake Paul, who, frankly, the only thing that he wants in life is people to respect him as a, oh, I'm a tough guy, right? What does every athlete want? They want to cross over and be a star. They want people to put them in movies. They want everybody to admire them. But what does every entertainer want? They want to be taken seriously, whether it's for their athletic skill or whether it's, I'm such a tough guy. Oh, look how strong I am. Jake Paul had a lot of money before he ever started doing boxing. So is he here in boxing to make money? My long and short answer of that is no. He's here to try and look like a tough guy. He's here to try and be, Johnny come lately. I'm somebody worth paying attention to in the boxing space. He's talking about calling out Canelo Alvarez. Do I think that's a good idea? No. But do you understand where he's coming from? He's a young man that says he wants to go out there and basically find out how great he could be. He has any choice that he can make in life, right? He's got a lot of money. He's very young. And what has he done with that time? He's taken a lot of money. He's invested in shooting steroids up his ass. He's invested in, taking all these boxing training camps pretty seriously. So what you've seen is one guy has basically been invested for the last few years in becoming a great boxer. The other guy has been hosting podcasts. He's been selling marijuana. Like, I love Mike Tyson. He's a cool guy. But what I also am very cognizant of, every casual person in my life, and what I mean by casual is I don't mean anything disrespectful. I appreciate everybody who is, tuning in, right? I appreciate everybody who watches the fights. I appreciate everybody, who makes this a business, an industry. And you need casual viewers just as you need people that are sharp, that are sophisticated, that have been in the game for a long time. And I'll tell you, sharps aren't always right. But what I could tell you is If you ask most people that are really around the combat sports game week in and week out and they understand fighting, they will tell you that 27 against 58 is too big of a gap, right? That is a gap that does not make for competitive fights most often. It makes for washout fights. It makes for fights that are not very competitive, not very fruitful. Now, does that mean it's a one-to-one relationship? No, you have some extenuating circumstances, but I could tell you guys, Jake Paul is a very strategic thinker. He brought in Ben Askren, and people were trying to sell you Ben Askren having a chance to win the fight. I remember it clear as day. But Ben's a former Olympian. But Ben's this and that. And what I had said at the time, and you guys can go back and check, I made a video that probably 17 people watched that I said, don't waste your money, right? Don't bet Ben Askren. I could tell you guys, if you went back and watched Ben Askren against Jay Heron, he looked like an athlete. If you watch him against Damian Maia, he looked like a guy who needed a hip replacement. And if you watch him against Jake Paul, the hip replacement guy was the one that showed up, okay? And by the way, Ben paid for a hip replacement with that fight. Do you think that he's regretting the fact he did that? No, he's very happy with the fact he took a JOB, right? He's very happy with the fact he went out there, did the job for Jake Paul, and he got the most money he's ever gotten in his life to go do a fight. And it was short, and it was sweet, and yeah, it was embarrassing, but then he just rolls on out and lives the rest of his life as a very respected wrestler, as a guy who can go back and coach anybody. So when you look back at how those fights work, Jake Paul got everybody convinced before the fact. Hey, this guy could beat me, right? He fought in the UFC. He's a real tough guy. He's a former Olympian. But the whole point was Ben Askren, that was an Olympian, was 10 years ago. Ben Askren would have rolled himself up at that point in his career. If you took old school Ben Askren, who fought Jay Heron in Bellator, he would have embarrassed the Ben Askren that fought in the UFC because he was a shell of himself athletically. That's just the way that it was. So when I looked at that fight, I saw people being taken for a ride. When I looked at the fight against Tyron Woodley, I thought, you know what? Maybe the rubber could meet the road. Maybe this could be more competitive. I saw it going to a decision. I went to Cleveland to watch the fight, and it went to a decision. I had bets on Jake Paul moneyline. I had bets on the fight to go the distance. I had bets on Jake Paul by decision, and I sprinkled on Tyron Woodley by decision 14-1. Tyron Woodley went to a close decision there. It was not a great fight, but it was a fight where you say, you know what? You got a mid-30s Tyron Woodley. You know, he's very low volume, right? He doesn't throw a lot, so he can kind of just stand out there and exist for a long enough time. And he threw, he landed a couple decent shots. He gave you some hope spots, but ultimately, guys, Tyron Woodley didn't have too much. So then what happened? They run it back out again. They do the same fight, and he puts Tyron Woodley in a body bag, okay? And that should have been the wake-up call for MMA fans that, hey, let's stop sending our faded old legends in there to get cleaned up by Jake Paul and added to a highlight reel. But we didn't learn our lesson. So we had to go see Nate Diaz get dropped in there. And we didn't want that, but that's what we saw. And we had to go see Anderson Silva do the JOB. And at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, okay, what's the difference between Tommy Fury, the only guy who's beaten, Jake Paul inside a boxing competition, and Mike Tyson? Obviously, you can go to the credentials, right? One of them is a world champion, and one of them is just some guy from England, right? Who's a brother of a world champion. So big difference there, I will grant. But what else? One of them is a young man. One of them is a guy who's in his athletic prime, and he went out there and they had a close fight, and there were two young guys that both had something to prove, right? Both had something to lose. Mike Tyson, what does he have to lose, guys, if he loses to Jake Paul? It is what it is. People will say what they said 22 years ago, which is Mike is old, Mike is washed, and Mike never should have been in there. And that's what they've been saying for 20 years about the guy. Okay, so if he goes out there and beats Jake Paul, it is an indictment of Jake Paul. It is Jake Paul being exposed as this guy is just no good. But when you look, I know that Dixon is saying in my chat right now, Book's going to fleece, everyone picking a side, draw is the play plus 1,000. I hear what you're saying, Dixon, but here's the problem with that. Number one, most people are not betting boxing money lines on a three-way market. Now, I have seen a few people get roped in on that already today, and shout out to those people. Y'all learned a sad lesson potentially, but the three-way market in boxing, if you guys aren't familiar, means outcome, draw, right? So that means you get better price on Jake Paul, you get better price on Mike Tyson, but if it goes to a draw, you get your money taken away from you. If you bet a straight money line in this case, and the fight goes to a draw, you should have your wager returned to you. So I will say, Nick in the chat says, books need Paul huge. I agree with that. Based on my understanding, guys, the books are going to need Jake Paul. Now, there are big bets on Jake Paul. People have said that in the comments as well. I want to thank you guys, everybody who's participating, sharpest chat in the game. There have been a lot of sharp bets, in my opinion, that have come in on Jake Paul, big ones. There have also been some whale plays on Jake Paul that are probably not sharp nor square. They're just people with a lot of money in the casino. Then here's what I've also noticed. Everybody that I have spoken to, guys, from a non-combat sports perspective, is liking Mike Tyson to win the fight. Does that mean they're betting their hard-earned money? That's a different story potentially. But every casual observer that I've talked to about this fight, I'll run you through the conversation that I had. It's a standard conversation. Liam, who do you think is going to win this fight? And then I tell them the sad truth, which is that I think Jake Paul is going to win the fight. And then they tell me, but it's Mike Tyson. And the thing about that is there is a nostalgic appeal in fighting that is hard to get away from, right? You say to yourself, but I've seen these moments. I've seen this guy. I was there for this. And he's special and he's different. But the one thing that has, been the equalizer throughout time is when you are the man, you're in your prime, you feel great, you fight one way. And when you're not the man anymore, it could be such a drop-off. Guys, go look at Johnny Hendricks. You could see like a 2-year time span when he went from being one of the best welterweights in the world, going tit for tat with George St. Pierre, to a guy who looked like a shell of himself. That's one example from the world of mixed martial arts, but he went from winning UFC title fights to losing bare knuckle boxing matches, and the time frame wasn't that long. So when you go back and look at these kind of fights, you have to say to yourself, okay, what is the average consumer thinking? And in my humble opinion, the average consumer is thinking about this. Jake Paul is a YouTuber. Mike Tyson is the man. Mike Tyson is the baddest man to ever live. And I'm thinking Jake Paul is a juiced up 27-year-old who's been doing just boxing for the last several years. And Mike Tyson self-admittedly couldn't participate in this bout because of a medical emergency in July. The guy has been many times in a wheelchair, hospitalized. He said, I thought I was going to die. He does an interview with a little girl the other day where he says, there is no such thing as legacy. I don't believe in legacy, right? He's saying it's not about legacy for me. I'm here to make some fucking money for my family and then move the fuck on. Like, that's what Mike Tyson is doing. And I think that when you look at a guy like, Mike, does he have power? They say it's the last thing to go, right? So could I see some world in which Mike has some modicum of success, especially early? Yeah, he's in shorter rounds. He does look like he can move around on the pads for a minute or two at a time. But do I think he's going to put down a guy like Jake? No, I think Jake has a self-preservation streak. I think he's going to run away if he needs to. I think he's going to clinch, push, do whatever it takes to tire out Mike. And when Mike starts to tire out, then I think Jake can take over with volume. I think Jake could hurt him with a big overhand right. I don't want to see it, but I know that he's capable of doing it. And so for me, ultimately, the way I see this fight is pretty straightforward. I think Jake Paul's going to win it. I wish it wasn't so. I think that Mike Tyson should not be, out there at 58 years of age. I do think that there is a live possibility this fight is rigged, guys. Make no mistake about it. For or against, right? When you talk about a fight that's on Netflix, a fight that's with a Jake Paul, a Paul brothers in a fight, there could be some fugazi. There could be something a little bit underhanded. But if you were lining this fight and it was a fight that was not being influenced, that was not being rigged, there was no, funny business, it wasn't an entertainer, then I would be lining it about minus 400 for the Jake Paul side, based on what we know about youth, based on what we know about athleticism, minus 400 or more. So I think it's Jake. I think he's going to win the fight, but all love and respect to Mike Tyson. I don't want to see him get done dirty. I don't want to see my man get put in the box. I pray that that's not the outcome, but I just got to call it the way I see it, and I see this being a Jake Paul win. So God bless you guys. Thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, come back later. We're talking UFC 309. Stay tuned for that. 11:30 Live to Thrive with Uncle Weezy. Hope to see you guys there. Take care, everybody.